everyone for a really successful action today. An action, so let's say, no to war. No to war. No to NATO. No to NATO. Stop warmongering. Stop warmongering. So this action in Winnipeg today was part of a week of actions across Canada called by the Canadian Peace Network, which is an umbrella organization of many organizations across Canada. This is an organization, the event in Winnipeg was with Peace Alliance Winnipeg, but obviously many organizations got together to make this such a successful turnout. A very good reaction from the people on the streets. We distributed some 200 of the World Beyond War statement. So since there's been so many people who've worked to make this action successful, I'm going to ask a few of them just to give a few words of the importance of today, the importance of our work. So the first person I'd like to ask is Diwa Marcelino from Migrante, Manitoba.
Good afternoon. You just gotta press this? Press the trigger the whole time. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm proud to stand here with all peace-loving advocates, anti-war advocates, and everyone here willing to gather and fight for peace and fight against war and imperialism. On behalf of Migrante Manitoba, a proud member of Bayan Canada, which is a multi-sectoral alliance of anti-imperialist organizations representing women, youth, migrants, we stand together with people of Turtle Island to say no to war. A few years back, Justin Trudeau and the Canadian government was about to sell attack helicopters to Rodrigo Duterte, a man, the president of the Philippines at the time, who was charged with killing over 30,000 people.
Shame.
It was the action of peace advocates such as yourselves across Canada which prompted a review of the attack helicopter sale. Peace advocates and anti-war advocates across Canada, across the world, are fighting against capitalism and imperialism and its effects on human beings. We stand together with everyone to continue the fight. We stand together in Canada to stop our complicity in imperialism around the world. Canadian mining, Canadian sales to Saudi Arabia, for instance, places like Philippines, is fostering war, fostering hunger, fostering rape, fostering death and destruction. We call on our Canadian government to pull out of NATO. Canada out of NATO. No to war. No to war. Thank you. Thank you, Marcelino. The next person I'd like to call up is Ernie Weens. He's been coming to Peace Alliance Winnipeg actions around the question of the fighter jets. I think some of our actions in this late winter about the war in Ukraine and NATO's involvement there. You may have read that he is against the Canadian purchase of fighter jets, and he actually staged a fast. So Ernie Weens he's from LaSalle, but he's also a member of World Beyond War.
Thank you, Glenn. It's good to see you all here. Closer. Can you hear me? Okay, I'll try and speak up. I was recently in Ottawa on a campaign to end world hunger. This was with the Canadian Food Grains Bank, and we met with quite a few MPs and senators. And we reminded them that a lot of the hunger in the world is caused by war and conflict. And our role in Ottawa was to get more money from Canada to help end world hunger through the Canadian Food Grains Bank and organizations like it. But then when you talk about the fact that the cause of world hunger to a large degree is war and conflict, and maybe we need to spend less money on more fighter jets and more warships and more drones and give some of that money to ending hunger, you don't get very far. So it's a reminder for all of us that what we're doing here is really very important, to speak out against war and the horrors of war. It just leads to more war and destruction. nonviolence in the long run, and it's been demonstrated historically, can be far more effective than violence. And I could go on, but I think maybe there's others who want to speak. But thank you all for coming out, and let's not give up. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Ernie. The next person I'd like to call up is Sarah from Peace Alliance Winnipeg. Sarah?
Hello. Okay, hi. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah from Peace Alliance Winnipeg. Yeah, I didn't really prepare anything, but I just wanted to kind of talk about the situation that's happening in Canada right now, and the amount of money that is going towards war in Canada is just absolutely, like, disgraceful. We have so many people here that are starving, that don't have houses, that attend emergency rooms, and there's no doctors for them. Things are really bad here, and we're just giving billions and billions away in war, and it's just really awful. So, yeah, I'm just really happy to see everybody here today. Tell your friends about what's going on. Get them to come to our rallies. We can build this, and we can really tell people that we are not okay with this. And that's all.
Thank you. A very good message that we are not okay with this. We are not okay with Canada participating in these wars, funding the war in Ukraine. We are not okay with what Canada has been doing in Latin America. We are not okay with any of this, and Canada needs to develop a foreign policy that is in the interest of not only the Canadian people, but the people everywhere in the world. So the next speaker, please, is Rob Crooks from Manitoba Cuba Solidarity and the Canada-Cuba Network.
Hi, everybody. It is great to see everybody out here, and I hope that we can keep this momentum going and this movement growing, because it's really important, and when the people come together, we can make change. So I do want to announce that next Sunday, right here at the same spot, there will be a rally in support of Cuba, as the UN General Assembly will be meeting in New York on November 2nd and November 3rd, and again they will be voting on the U.S. blockade on Cuba. And of course, we're expecting for the 30th year in a row that the UN General Assembly will vote against the U.S. blockade on Cuba. And we need to pressure the Canadian government into not only voting against it, but to speaking out against it, because it's really a genocidal blockade, which the aim of which is really to take back the land and resources of Cuba. In the 1960s, Cuba put in place a bunch of agrarian reform laws, which basically took land away from U.S. corporations and U.S. individuals and gave it back to the Cuban people, and it became collectively owned by the Cuban people. And when you look at U.S. laws such as the Helms-Burton Act, they talk about the only way we'll lift the blockade is if they give us our land back. So U.S. is demanding that Cuba give back Cuban land to America. So we need to speak out against this. We cannot be okay with it, and I hope to see you all right here next Sunday at 1 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Of course, Cuba has been one of the countries which has been resilient and steadfast in its opposition to U.S. imperialism. And it has built a much different society than the one we have here in Canada, a society in which the people are valued. So the next person is Cam Scott from the Manitoba Committee of the Communist Party of Canada. Cam.
Hello. I'll only take up a moment of your time. I'd like to heartily second all of the wonderful statements we've heard today. My name is Cam Scott. I'm from the Communist Party of Canada. Just last week, I believe Canada committed another $600 million or more to military aid, lethal aid to Ukraine. This is really a drop in the ocean when you look at how much money Canada has hemorrhaged into exacerbating a war which is in danger of pushing us across a nuclear precipice. This could be a cataclysm on an unthinkable scale. Canada's military adventurism as a notable arms dealer to so many sordid puppet regimes around the world needs to be pointed up at every opportunity. Canada's record of supplying weapons to these conflicts, it belies our self-image as a peaceful nation, as a peacekeeping nation, as brokers of peace on the world stage. But of course, we know that the Canadian working class, working people everywhere, are peace-loving and oppose such machinations. We want to have high-quality conversations everywhere we can. We want a labor movement for peace. We want to move the grassroots toward demands for peace. Everywhere we can, we need to foreground the necessity of a negotiated peace in Europe between Russia and Ukraine. We need to oppose all of these arms deals in every possible setting, in all of the social movements. This is a number one priority for the global working class, for the working class in Canada. It's something that should be on the tip of all of our tongues always. This is such a heartening turnout, and I'm so glad to participate in this event today. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things that's been missing in this whole war around Ukraine and the Canadian involvement is actually to have that discussion about what has been the motivation behind that war. And it's been very heartening to see the response of people to our calls and our banner about Abolish NATO for world peace. It is NATO, and some people have questioned us on the street as to why you oppose NATO. The question is, if you look at NATO's history, it's NATO that has caused not only the Cold War, but all the conflicts of the Cold War. It is NATO that intervened in the recent period in countries such as Yugoslavia, Libya, Iraq, Syria, and now Ukraine. Before that, it was this whole Cold War that had provoked the conflict in Korea. It had been the Cold War which was behind the massacres of communists in Indonesia. It has been the Cold War and U.S. imperialism which has been behind really all the problems that the people of the world face. The other day, Tamara Lawrence from Voice of Women and the Canadian Peace Network confronted the Defense Minister, Anita Anand, and she held up a sign that amongst one of the things it said was stop funding the war, but it also was a sign against NATO. In her response, Anita Anand said that it was organizations, I'm paraphrasing, but it was organizations such as NATO and the norms of international rules of law that have protected Canadians and made for a stable world. But if you look at it, it's NATO which has caused these problems, these so-called rules of law that govern the actions of the United States and others have been used to intervene in countries around the world, to deny countries their sovereign rights, and to provoke war everywhere. So today's action is very important because there has been, in the media and amongst our Canadian politicians, an absolute refusal, of the politicians in Parliament, I should say, an absolute refusal to talk about the real situation that's going on. So today's action was very good response from the people on the street, and let's build these things further. Is there anyone else who would like to say a few words? Okay. Marianne Sorelli.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you all out here today. I want to focus my remarks on two things. The media representation and coverage of what I'm now calling the NATO war against Russia in Ukraine. And I think we should frame it that way. It's a NATO war against Russia using Ukraine and not the Russia war against Ukraine. So I'm going to talk about the media representation of that and the pretext and the other misnomer of saying that this is an unprovoked war with Russia invading Ukraine, unprovoked attack on Ukraine by Russia. The other thing I want to talk about briefly is organizing a peace movement and organizing to build this movement by having some activities I think that will be inviting to people so that they can learn about the history that Henry Heller is here is writing about. John Ryan just wrote a very good article that was in Ethnorama, which is a small local paper that is now being pressured to cease to exist. So the media representation is biased of the war. CBC, all the mainstream media in the West is saying that this is, poor Ukraine is being persecuted by Russia. And we know if you take the time to learn about the history and understand the provocation of Russia, understand how NATO requires, and the U.S. in particular, with half of their federal budget going into the military, they require wars for their economy. So that these ongoing wars are needed to maintain the war economy that we have, the globalized war economy. So one of the things we need to be able to do is to stand up and to keep little papers like Ethnorama in publication. So here's what's happening. Ethnorama has had a few NDP MPs support the paper with ads, and recently the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, after an article published by John Ryan, they pressured the NDP to withdraw their ads, and the NDP has capitulated. And they have withdrawn their support for Ethnorama to again be silencing any kind of discussion about options for peace and negotiating a peace treaty with Russia to stop this war in the Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine. So what does that mean for us? All of us who are peace-loving activists, all of us who want to see an end of war. I've recently also joined World Beyond War, and I'm taking in their webinars and learning from their really good resource material online. So we need to start organizing some teach-ins, and we need to have some outreach to some of the other organizations that would support us. There's lots of students in peace and conflict studies. There's lots of students that are studying human rights. There's lots of young people, I think, out there that understand this can become a defining conflict of our times, this invasion of Ukraine. So I'm with you. I want to help build and work. I don't know, some of you may not know me. I was in MLA for 13 years. I ran for mayor in 2006. Paul helped that little campaign and I'm now a full-time organizer. I do full-time organizing with all sorts of different workshops and different groups. And I'm quite horrified by what's happening and the waste of resources, like other people have said, the waste of resources in a time of climate emergency, in a time of massive inequity, that we are still, as a species, investing billions and billions of dollars in war is just madness. And we have to not be afraid to stand up and say that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marianne. Anybody else before we really conclude at the...
Yes, I will speak.
You will speak.
Yes, I wrote a song. I wrote a song, and it's called...
Very good.
It's called Tomorrow's Sorrows. Wait, am I speaking here? Tomorrow's sorrows can kick you in the head. Tomorrow's sorrows can make you want to stay in bed. Tomorrow's sunrise can wake you up instead. Life's too short to want to wind up dead. Everybody now.
with shouting a few slogans against war. Say no to war.
No to war.
Canada must get out of the business of war.
Canada must get out of the business of war.
End militarism.
End militarism.
Abolish NATO for world peace.
Abolish NATO for world peace.
Thank you.